Hi, and welcome to our next VC Sports and Sport Hiatus office hours. It is May 20th at 12 o'clock Eastern, and we've got a great panel discussion with an incredible group of panelists. So I wanted to spend a brief moment saying hello and welcoming everybody, and making sure that my audio doesn't turn on in the chatting, and give you a little bit of an explanation as to why we're here and I think what we want to talk about. So in a minute or less, or 2 minutes or less, let's say, we started NYVC Sports in 2011, Deepan Parikh and I, with an intent to bring together entrepreneurs, investors, and sports executives. Those three communities were working almost entirely separately. You had investors at summits and in wonderful environments, brainstorming on how to find great businesses. You had entrepreneurs in meetups and in high school basements trying to figure out how to innovate and creating hackathons. And you had sports executives at marquee sporting events and conferences. And those three communities just quite simply needed to spend more time together, getting to know each other and working together. Fortunately, as Bryant knows oh so well, Wayne Gretzky was famous for saying, "Skate to where the puck is going." We ended up in a spot, and the puck fortunately just came to us, where sports drives innovation in so many ways due to high concurrency and the fact that people watch things live and with a lot of passion. So welcome everybody. We've got a great panel. I'm excited to get out of the way and let these guys wax poetry about such great experiences from the entrepreneurial world to the investor world to the league world, team world. And so please feel free to tweet at Sport Hiatus, at Global VC Sports. Each of our great panelists' Twitter handles or company Twitter handles are on the screen as well. There are polls that'll be alongside in the right-hand column. We'll be doing some live blogging. There'll be some sentiment analysis. So have a good time, and I'll come back on at the end to thank a bunch of people. But Bryant, Frank, Lou, Rachel, this is your show. Take it away, and looking forward to hearing the discussion as much as probably anybody else who's tuned in. So Bryant, this is your show. Frank, Lou, Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
We really appreciate it. Thanks. And first, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in and saying hello to us and spending an hour with us. When Jeff approached me to do this, I said, "Great, that sounds like a lot of fun." But I wanted to ensure that the people that we invited as panelists on this, I'll use a scientific term, we're all badasses. We're all people that we're able to make hard decisions with limited amounts of data and be able to figure out really complex, really hard things, kind of that 24/7 SWOT analysis, SWOT, SWOT analysis that for non-business school types, that is constant in our worlds, right? As we're trying to figure out really hard situations. Well, we've been dropped in our laps a really hard situation, and the whole world has, and we're navigating, figuring it out. Everyone has their own COVID calculus, if you will, okay? And so we were lucky enough to get Frank Supovitz, old friend and a colleague at the NHL for many years ago, who is the master at planning for things when they go wrong. And Frank's done a whole bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about. Lou Shipley, a friend from way back when in college, and an amazing investor in what I do now, and teacher at MIT and Harvard. And Rachel Jacobson, longtime NBA executive and noteworthy person in the sports world, who's gone on to help build and run startups, and now is the new president of the Drone Racing League. So welcome to everyone. We're excited to have you. And I think what we're going to try and make this very conversational. Send in your questions and other things that you want commented on. We'll try and get to some of them by the end of the hour. But I think where we'll start, Frank had the duty of overseeing, probably the most watched, Olympics may be close, but the most watched event in the world for years. He ran the Super Bowl, oversaw the Super Bowl. So putting on your old hat, Frank, right now, if you were thinking about the upcoming season and thinking about the Super Bowl, what are you thinking about?
what are you not thinking about? Right. There's really not much not to think about right now. That what the league is contending with, obviously, is how to go forward with fans, with a limited number of fans, with no fans at all. Putting together a television product, they can do that. They know how to do that. They do it really well. How you take the current situation and fit your plan against that, is the big issue. I would say that if you're asking me how I would be thinking about Super Bowl and really concentrating on that, I would say just like everything else the National Football League does, and I've not worked for them for 6 years, but they're the proverbial duck on the lake, right? They're calm and cool and collected and quiet up on the surface, and they're talking about moving forward, as per plan, as per schedule. Trust me when I'm telling you, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's thinking about every contingency. They're not talking about those things, and that's fine, but they're thinking about every single thing. And when it comes to Super Bowl, it gets enormously complicated. I think, one of the biggest things they're going to have to deal with is to figure out what their ticket commitments are going to look like, what their capacity is going to look like. At the beginning of the season, you may have no fans, you may have 15% of the capacity. What's it going to look like the first week of February, right? And how do you plan ahead? You've got contractual obligations for those tickets. You've got, they're $2,500 a ticket in some cases. You're talking about huge swings in revenue and how you're going to deal with that. And all of those tickets are either contractually obligated or by virtue of the league's bylaws divided up amongst the teams. Who's going to get what? Who's going to get what to be able to sell? Who's going to be able to monetize what? That is going to be a real moving target for them because, again, they don't know if it's no fans, some fans, a little bit more than some fans, or all fans. They're thinking about hotels. They're thinking about, how many hotel rooms are we going to need? And on what week are we going to need them? They're in really good shape with respect to Tampa right now, because Tampa, and it's weird, right? Because the last time they had an issue with worrying about hotel rooms was during the last, the recession. 2008 season, 2009 Super Bowl, where was it? It was in Tampa. Go figure. But what you have in Tampa, at least, is you can fill up hotel rooms there, but you've also got Orlando 90 minutes away. So they've got, the ability to get hotel rooms. Whether they're going to be able to build a community of fans or community of business partners, all in one place, they don't know that. What are their big hospitality events going to look like? Their tailgate party is 10,000 of their closest friends. If they've only got 12,000 tickets that they can sell, what's the tailgate party going to look like? Are you going to have big buffets? Are people going to be sharing, the experience that way? What are their fan events going to look like? Are they going to do the NFL experience at the convention center? That's a real high touch event, right? People are touching things all the time, very interactive. So I'm giving you a toe dipped in the water. They're going to have to get completely wet on everything.
Rachel, little bit different setting, obviously, but you had the good fortune and misfortune of starting during a pandemic. You haven't met in person a lot of your colleagues. What's that been like? And as I said to Frank, what's keeping you awake at night? What are you thinking? You can control germs. How do you control anxiety?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I had accepted the job, met the CEO, the CTO, and the COO, 3 individuals at the company, and had a start date. The pandemic happened and have been remote ever since. So 98% of this organization I have met on Zoom. And what you're missing out is just from a human connection. As we all know, this business, other successful companies are built on relationships. And that's always been core to my DNA as I've grown up in sports and other industries, is those relationships that I have across the board, people that work for me, with me, alongside, of being able to get everyone to rally around, to be solutions driven and proactive. And in this setting, I've been hyper focused on humanizing these connections and really understanding the employees across DRL. How are you doing? You know, the anxiousness, the anxiety, everybody has it. You know, whether you're homeschooling your own children, anxieties around your parents, siblings, you know, there's not anyone, I think, right now that can wake up and feel like they're in a good spot or knows exactly what's going to happen when we think about a day from now, let alone, you know, Frank, to your point, the Super Bowl next year. And you can plan all you want, and then the curveballs happen. So it's been interesting, but I've really used it as an opportunity to get very dialed in to how each of these employees are going to thrive when we come out of this, and understanding, you know, what is their own situation, what are their passion points, you know, what has been their history at DRL, and, you know, a lot of focus on career development planning too. Just how do we use this time and really pivot employees that may have done one thing, but we're all doing another thing right now. And how do you use that, you know, great talent that you're looking for, to throw them into something else that we didn't plan to do?
Lou, if I can have you pick up a little bit on that. It's around the people, right? When we started talking about this panel, you know, we did a little bit of prep work, and Rachel really emphasized her people, and, you know, making sure that they're in a good place first is bedrock, right? I've noticed recently that you wrote a series called "Home is the New Enterprise." So is that, again, focus on people as the first place to start?
Absolutely. And when I first started thinking about writing The Home is the New Enterprise, it's sort of, first thing that came to mind was when I was a CEO, thinking about the changes that I made in the culture of the company at Black Duck Software. How could I have made those if I was in Rachel's situation of working remotely? And it's got me thinking about some of the changes, three big changes. One is culture. I think that's what's probably the most important thing. Productivity, we all feel in some ways more productive, but in some ways we don't know what the boundaries are, where to turn this off. And then from an investing point of view, GC's looking at this with me, is security. I mean, because, you know, I didn't sign up to be a CIO or a CTO, but all of a sudden, everything that's in my home now is got to be as rock solid as what is, you know, traditionally done in a corporate environment. So Bryant, the thing, we came up with a new role when I was at Black Duck. We had typical, you know, functional roles: sales, marketing, CTO. We created a new role called the VP of Culture, which was separate from HR. HR was, you know, compliance and regulations and hiring and firing. Culture was about, like, how do you feel at the office? And it was a really important role for us because we were able to then recruit and retain, you know, great people because we focused on our culture. So I think this pandemic and what's happened with working remotely is going to provide some opportunities to sort of show unique cultures. And so, I mean, Rachel, I think you're focusing on exactly the right thing. Focus on the people to start.
You know, what one of the things that we're seeing, you know, our company Burst, we're very focused on local, and we've been really lucky over the last couple of months. We've had a front row seat to America being nice to each other. There's been a whole bunch of things, seriously, there's been a whole bunch of things that you know, everything's different than 2-3 months ago, right? And all kinds of curveballs,
Everything's different, everything's
different, right? So one of the things that we have witnessed up close and personal through just all of the stuff going through our pipes to our partners at the very grassroots local level is people are being kind, they're being empathetic, they're yearning for surety and confidence, right? And so as a result, they're reaching out to each other in ways that they wouldn't otherwise, right? So I should mention also, just to fill in a couple of holes, you know, Lou recently, he left Black Duck probably 2.5-3 years ago after a terrific ramp up and a sale to to a company that Synopsys that went out, worked very well for his investors and for his team. You know, Rachel, I'm going to do a little commercial for each of you. Rachel, I timed it when I dove into into the Drone Racing League. I advise everyone to it took 10 minutes for me to go, this is good. This is really good. This is great, right? So I advise everyone listening to do that, okay? It's a really great property that is ascending in a really strong way. And Frank, I'm going to come back to you. For those of you that don't know, Frank wrote this, and it's a great touch point for what we're talking about today, when things go wrong. And probably one of the most high profile things ever to go wrong in front of 100 million plus people happened in New Orleans at the Super Bowl. Frank was being interviewed by 60 Minutes at the time, and the lights went out. Take it from there, Frank.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you want me to take it from there. You know, usually when 60 Minutes is watching you deal with something you didn't want to deal with, it's not really a good day. It ended up being a really good day only because they were able to document what we did, and I wouldn't honestly have remembered. You know, I still had a little bit of PTSD, you know, from that for quite a while. You know, one of the things that I think was the most that I'm asked about the most on that is, you know, what's the first thing you did? You know, what did you focus on first? And, you know, it really fits with what Rachel and Lou were saying, which is it's about the people. You know, on one hand, you're faced with the challenge of having to understand whether you can restore power to the Superdome, and we had an incredible partner in the operations group, and Doug Thornton at the Superdome, and all of those folks really kind of knocking down those issues, while law enforcement was looking after whether it was a terror attack or a cyber terror attack. Nobody really knew what was going on. But the very first thing that we did, and again, I would have never remembered this. Thank God the cameras were rolling, because it really did capture it. The first thing we said was, okay, what do we tell people? You know, what are we going to communicate? What do we tell people? Do we tell people to stay? Do we tell people to evacuate? Because we don't know what the root cause of this situation is. You don't want to make a rash decision or you know, an immediate decision based on the adrenaline coursing through your veins. What you really want to do is, what are we going to tell 80,000 people or 74,000 people at Superdome? And you know, do we have a way to talk to them? And the answer was yes, we had a way. You know, most public address systems in stadiums have a battery backup for that purpose, right? Life safety issues. If you were to have a power failure, you've got about 30 minutes of talk time. And the very first thing we did was just tell people we're on it. We recognize it. You don't want people to wonder whether you're totally confused, asleep at the switch. They want to be assured that somebody is dealing with it. You don't want them to scratch their heads, wonder. We're watching social media blow up across the country, but we're also starting to see social media blow up in the building, and what people wondering what to do. And our mission right up front was tell people what's going on. At first, we didn't know what it was, but we told them we were dealing with it and we're working on getting power restored. Within 3 minutes, we knew it wasn't a terrorist attack. We told people to wait. You know, we will be back. You know, please stay in place. It ended up being, you know, the best half hour of merchandise and beer sales in the history of the Superdome because people had nothing to do. And so, you know, thankfully we kept all the essential systems, you know, working, like beer taps.
So in that 34 minutes, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Just to get just really specific on one thing that we've worked together a long time, and this is just really struck me as above and beyond. There were 10 minutes in there, the last 10 minutes, that were especially challenging and especially important. Could you talk about those for a few minutes?
Sure. Within 24 minutes, we had the lights back up to full color temperature. Television was ready to go. And we were under an enormous amount of pressure to get the game started again. It happened to would have been a kickoff, which is exactly what the next play was going to be. We could have teed up the ball and gotten going. What we did instead, thank you 60 Minutes for documenting this, was we said, we're going to take the next 10 minutes. We didn't know it was going to be 10 minutes, but we're not going to get started again until we know every other system we need to make this game authentic and deserving of the Super Bowl name. Make sure every system is back up and running. So everyone in the control room, go through everything you do. And before we get started again, make sure the score clock's working, make sure the coach to quarterback systems are working, make sure instant replay is working. Every single system. We don't get started again until everybody in this room tells me that they're ready. And it turned out that one of the coach to quarterback systems wasn't working. So we had the time to be able to fix that. But think about it. If we had gotten started again and the instant replay system, for example, didn't work, and there was another score, and that game had a lot of scoring. If there was another score, a controversial play, official goes under the hood, and they couldn't look at an instant replay, what's the story now? It's not about a blackout anymore.
Right.
It's about whether the game was authentic. And we were able to take those minutes to make it authentic.
Right. So not missing there proved to be really important. Lou, you're what you attract. I hear your classes at Harvard and MIT are always full because you talk about sales. You really talk about sales forecasting. I've had the privilege of being in some of those sessions with you. You're an expert in forecasting sales, right? So, okay. So now looking forward, how do you forecast? How do you plan like Frank did? How do you plan for that now? And when have you dropped the ball and it not worked in the past?
Yeah, no, it's, one of the reasons students like the class is, they tend to think of sales initially as kind of like the ShamWow guy, like, why would I ever want to go into sales? And then they realize that, in every business, you have to build a product, you have to sell the product. And in every budgeting cycle, the first question is, all right, how much of this stuff we're going to sell? And then you set your expense budget based on what the sales forecast is, and that can either come from the CFO, CEO, CRO, whatever. But it's really hard. Outside of a time like this, forecasting is super, super hard, and it takes it takes a lot of there's a lot of science behind it in terms of, first of all, training how your salespeople are supposed to look at a deal and find out if they have happy years or they're just listening to the customer say things, or is that going to go into the forecast? So if you put something that's lousy in the forecast, when you roll it all up as a company, you're going to miss. So I've written about missing and learning from that, learning from your mistakes. So trying to demystify the whole process, and to say that if you don't get this right, and I can tell you this from personal experience, you can lose your job if you don't understand it. And I lost a job as a CEO because I didn't understand forecasting of my business. So we take it really seriously. And I'm on 6 different private company boards right now. Pretty much all of them went through the same process of saying, we don't really know. We think the business is going to come back in a few months, but we're going to probably get conservative. If they're really well capitalized, they're fine. They probably didn't make any major cuts. They weren't as well capitalized. They had to take some expense cuts and hope that they can make it through. And so we're just starting to see now a few of the companies that I'm involved with are starting to up their forecasts, starting to feel a little bit better about things.
So Rachel, to pick up on that real quick, I just wanted to ask you, you have a unique background in that you had all that time at a league, right? And you got to grow a whole bunch of stuff at the NBA. And then you were in a startup, in a pure startup for a few years, for a couple of years, right? So you had that raw startup crazy experience. Now what you're doing is kind of a hybrid.
Yeah.
Besides, you got your people in place. What's next? What are you thinking about? What's your forecasting? How are you approaching this now?
So Lou and I are actually talking after this when we talk about forecasting. I have a little side chat going on. No, it's a great question. So with a 5-year-old property, and when I think about 21 years at the NBA, incredible leadership who had the vision of being in countries like China before their sports league. So I grew up in such an atmosphere of innovation and progressive leadership, really celebrating diversity and inclusion. So I had all of that when I looked at the most successful sports properties. And then to your point, kind of jumped off a cliff when you think about starting at an early stage company and you're literally in charge of everything in hand-to-hand combat, just every day, cutting across all aspects of the business. And now it's almost like the perfect storm of how do I take the 21 years at the NBA, all the learnings, but calibrate it to a 5-year-old property, which is such a baby. When you look at some of the other sports leagues that, we've all worked at, they have, tens of years on DRL. But what I'm focused on is looking at the growth trajectory to date of the business. So where have we seen those, heat spots relative to the demographics of our fan base? And, I see so much of that through the eyes of my 10-year-old twins. They're growing up in a world that they don't know a world without technology. Where I think about, when did I really get a cell phone, mom and dad? It was meet on the corner. So with that is knowing that this is a sport that's intersecting technology with the traditional aspect of there's winners and losers, but then building towards what I know millions of sports fans want in terms of what Brian said. They want speed, they want visually stunning atmospheres, and they want to know that this is the hottest thing for them to tune in. So really taking all of that together. And so many of the conversations that I've had over this first month are, this is exciting what you're doing. And a lot is around collaborations. So, there's not a call I'm not on. I think it was, earlier when we were all speaking that somebody doesn't disclose to me, they fly their own drones, their kids love it, they've watched it. So I need to figure out, what is it that is, what is it that DRL brings that we can continue to connect with our millions of fans and so many millions of fans that I know have little or no understanding to what we're doing. And that's really where you're going to see us pivot really quickly, as we have, to the virtual side of our business. And then when we get back into buildings, probably fanless for the foreseeable future, but to bring that all where we straddle the live event space as well as the esports space. And then, in the midst of me coming back to sports, so much that, I love about this industry, and you see this just during a global pandemic, is how everyone supports each other and really rallies around philanthropic initiatives. So there's so much that can be done, high tide raises all boats. But, as I've jumped in head first since day one is making sure that, the fabric of being charitable and putting a spotlight on underrepresented groups or issues that are happening around the world, that's going to be core to us as well, to our pilots, to our fans. So I have a lot on my plate. But, Brian, it was a great question where, I'm kind of looking at everything with a great opportunity to architecture and really blueprint with some of the best marketers in the world, along with other sports leagues, of how can we all play together for really the greater good of what we know sports fans want.
You mentioned the virtual versus the physical, right? Frank, at Fast Traffic, you advise some of the most high profile and since you left the NFL a few years ago, you advise some of the most high profile and amazing events that are out there to the physical. Okay, that question, that cloud that's hanging over so many people right now is, when is it going to be safe? What's that going to feel like, to go back, right? Before Rachel feels comfortable to have her fans there, before Lou feels comfortable to be in front of a classroom filled with
Right.
people, right? So we went through 9/11. What can we learn from that as it pertains to this?
I think what happened after 9/11 is there was this renewed focus on security. And there was always security in the background. We were always concerned about the safety of our players, of our guests, and our fans. But after 9/11, there was this immediate response to make sure that our venues were safe, but as important, that everyone felt that everybody felt safe, that there was this perception that they were being taken care of. And suddenly magnetometers, metal detectors, wanding, bag searches, things like that became really important to the scene. In the beginning, and I remember going to Madison Square Garden for a hockey game, actually, 10 days after, whatever it was. They were telling you to get to the building, 3 hours before, 4 hours before the puck drop, so that you could be processed. And it was an enormous inconvenience, but everybody kind of got it, and everybody played along for, however many weeks it took. And that's when venues started to bring on additional checkpoints. They started to understand what their throughput was really going to be like. And how much more equipment they needed, how many more lanes, what they needed to do, to continue to deliver that level of security and service, and then make it as convenient as possible. We don't even think about that now. I know I have to put my cell phone and my keys in a dish, and I have to walk through a mag. I actually feel underserved if I don't have to do that. I want to make sure that I'm in a safe place, that my family's in a safe place, and my guests are in a safe place. We're going to deal with a very similar scenario now, where cleanliness, not just sanitization, but cleanliness, is going to be something that our guests and fans are going to look for in a venue. You're going to encounter disinfecting and all those kinds of things, but what about all the garbage that's on the floor? Well, if there's garbage on the floor, you're not really taking care of keeping things clean. So therefore, I can make the mental leap that you're not as serious about cleaning the bathrooms and cleaning the points of touch and all of those kinds of things, touch points. And I think what's also going to happen, right now we're talking about infrared, contactless temperature taking. We're going to start thinking about not only how you detect people who may have a fever, but what you do with them when you do detect that. What's your conflict resolution area going to look like? How do you keep people safe inside that? You're going to need a lot more space to be able to do that. You need a separate exiting strategy for getting those people out of the line and not walking back through the line to get away. So technology will catch up with that too, just like they catch up with everything. Eventually you'll have thermal imaging as part of your metal detector, right? You're going to be able to, I would imagine, bolt a piece of equipment to the end of your existing magnetometers, and it will detect not only if you're carrying a knife or a pistol, but if you happen to be over 100.4 degrees. So the technology will catch up with it. When it does, it'll be a more convenient, just part of what we do.
Last week when I was preparing for this, heard from a friend who's here in Massachusetts, in terms of technology keeping up and starting to run ahead. And Lou, I'm going to come to you with this quick observation and a question. They in England, okay, at one Liverpool game, they have traced back to 150 deaths from this game in March. It's one game in March, right? When England, as you recall, was a little bit cavalier out of the gate, right, about their response to COVID. And So, they've done a 180, and, there's people working now on remote broadcasts, on remote productions, just doing everything they can to ensure that those facilities are safe before they let people in and undergo what Frank is describing. Lou, at General Catalyst right now, as an executive in residence, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? Are there, I know you work with Teamworks and you help start Avid, so you're no stranger to the sports vertical. What are you seeing and hearing out there right now?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think we're looking at, I think one of the things that's happened in this pandemic, it hasn't created anything new. It's just taken existing situations that were going on and accelerated them. I mean, look at just for example, look at Moderna, right? Applying a software approach to diseases and vaccinations, and basically reprogramming your body to the messenger RNA. I think there's something big there. I don't think it's just about COVID. I think it's about being able to apply a software model to get your body to fight diseases. They're going to go after cancer and other diseases after they get through COVID. So, but I think it's looking at and it's an interesting question, Brian, because I've done 6 startups, and one of the reasons I didn't think this was that scary, the pandemic, was that to join a startup, and Rachel, maybe you're feeling this, and Frank, you started your own business. When you join a startup, you don't have a right to exist, right? It's not like your IBM or Cisco that has a book of business that you're going to get a renewal the next year. You have no right to exist. So it's an existential threat as to whether you even are going to be around next month or next week. So you have to get with people who get it, that you don't have a right to exist, and there's 1,000 ways to blow up a startup, and I've seen a lot of them, right? So you have to find those people that really understand that and can power through the real difficulties, and then essentially create something out of nothing. So one of the things we're looking at is a number of themes. We're looking at the changes in education. My personal experiences I found as I started my semester at MIT teaching in person, and then I moved to Zoom for the second half of the semester. It's really hard to be kind of intimate with 70 students over Zoom. Like with 10, maybe, but 70, it's hard. So we're looking at the big changes in education, and then the big changes in the whole work from home, because I know there's a lot of CEOs I've talked to that are not going to re-up their leases when it's safe to go back, because they're pretty damn productive working from home, as long as we cover the things we talked about at the top of this event, that you look after your people and you're thinking about the culture and you're being, fair with them.
We're looking for us here, we're in Boston, and we, obviously we're hit pretty hard by this, but my small team has just done an exceptional job remotely that I'm really hesitant to bring people back for safety reasons, and that our productivity and our rhythm is so good right now.
Rhythm, yeah.
Our business has grown and feels great. Rachel, how are you thinking about this? I know you want to meet everyone, but is it the best thing to bring everyone back together?
No, it's a very careful process, as we're all talking about here. And there's so many areas that you need to focus on. Is geographically, where is everybody coming from and what is their commute in? So we have a headquarters in New York City, which, as we all know, is an epicenter right now relative to COVID cases. And if you're already on public transportation in the city, like, you can't trace back thousands of people then on one commuting day and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But really, at the foundation, when we look at this, is just not the place that we want to be the leaders. When you think about everyone going back to the office, we are, focused on our people as the guiding principle for when we return to a safe space. And if someone does not feel comfortable, we're not going to force them. It's like, you saw what Jack Dorsey said at Twitter. Yeah. If you don't want to come back, you don't need to. And we've seen the same thing, Brian, where the productivity, whether it's the engineers or the marketing team, there are certain people that are absolutely thriving in this situation. And maybe, again, the commute or whatever it was about being, whatever the workspace was, whether you have offices or open areas, that it may be best that we figure out that hybrid. But again, the guiding principle is, and I take my own barometer every day. My husband and I are working from home. We have the children, not knowing what's happening with school next year. Is, if I'm not safe myself to go back and I don't feel confident, I wouldn't put my employees in that same position. So, we're privy to all of the information that's coming out through government organizations, as well as just watching other companies. And again, this isn't that situation where I feel like, let's do the first race around a palace in Europe or other crazy things that we've done. This isn't the time where I want to say DRL were the first employees back in their office, because as we all know, as we've been following some other sports that were quick to get back, they're now having to pull back, if there were cases, if there were, some negativity around that. So we're closely watching.
We mentioned that, everything is different, right? And one of the crazy stats that I saw recently that came out of that's come out of this last Friday. This just blew me away. The market cap of Zoom, that everyone's using, is bigger than all of the US airlines combined as of last Friday.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all of this kind of like, okay, what's coming next, and trying to see around the corner. Right. I heard about Clorox and United signing a partnership. United Airlines, Hilton and Lysol just announced a big deal where they're working together. Right. Frank, I'm going to put you on the spot on this one.
Mhm.
What do you foresee as there these crazy combinations and this things out of the blue that you've either seen or that you think may be coming? And then Lou and Rachel, I'm going to go to you on the same one.
I think it makes 100% sense. It's dealing with what you think your fans, your guests, your customers, your viewers value. And safety is what they're valuing. So it doesn't surprise me at all that you're seeing these kinds of partnerships growing. I can't give you a specific instance. I'm going to leave that to Lou and to Rachel, but I think it makes 100% sense.
Yeah, one of the things I think we can learn here as we talked about sort of the remote world and working remotely is we're all experiencing being in the office and then being forced into this remote work and making the best of it. There are a number of companies that are really interesting to look at that started remote only and never had a headquarters. One of them is a company called GitLab. It's a large company, a tech software company that does DevOps. They have a 3,000-page employee handbook on how to work remotely. It's fascinating, and they have a role in the company, which is the other thing that's kind of interesting that Frank was talking about. This pandemic will change a lot of titles in the workplace. They have a head of remote, basically, and his job, there's a great article on TechCrunch about it just this morning. His job is to think about how workers work remotely and to keep them culturally engaged and happy and making sure they're listening to them. And the kinds of things you could usually do when you walk by and you see someone in an office, go, that guy doesn't look right today. Is there something wrong? Or maybe his mother's sick or something. That kind of stuff we can learn a lot from companies that started remote only. GitLab is one. And I'm on the board of a company called Wasabi in Boston that is basically remote as well. And they're really not, going back into the office. So to your point, Rachel, they're thinking they're doing pretty well this way. And I think there's going to also be some pressure to look at how much you can save on real estate. And do you really need a big office if you can be pretty effective? Maybe not everybody goes back to the office, but maybe a third or half of your employees work from home and you save a lot. You can save a lot and it drops the bottom line.
Rachel?
So unfortunately, with the airline Lysol partnership and Hilton, the offices, there is a run on those supplies. So, as everyone's thinking about how they get back to work, I literally was on a call yesterday with our team that's on the task force when we think about that. And that was one of the big things is how do we ensure based on the government protocols that you have when you think about, chief remote officer, chief hygiene officer. There are these positions that need to ensure that your spaces actually have the right disinfectant in all those areas. But that's, that's one side of the business. I definitely think coming out of this, to your point, Lou, it is going to look different. I don't think companies come back to the real estate they had. It's going to be some kind of hybrid, critical mass in one location, work from home. But if you're in that rhythm, as Brian said with his team, why do you want to change it up? We're going to be looking at this for the next several months, even if you get back to the office, a day or two. But what I think about is, where have we seen successes that we should continue to double down? Because I don't know when those live events are coming back, at least without fans. We'll be able to spin something up, and we're talking to arenas and stadiums right now to put a live event with no fans that we could, build amazing content capture. But we had 12 of our best pilots at home 2 weeks ago, and we cut a whole NBC show that aired last weekend that we're going to put on this Sunday, and that's going to run for the next 2 months. And in speaking with NBC, we could be looking at another slate of that. So when I think about, bringing that best in class content to the market, who are those partners that really have that fun personality? I'll throw out to Oreo, because they're always doing fun things, and other types of companies where, again, how do you play at home safe? And how do you do a bit more with family-friendly entertainment? And there are those companies that I immediately gravitate towards that we're going to be talking to.
So to that point, and to harken back to something that Lou said, startups don't have a right to exist, right? And you've got to get there, and you've got to prove it out, and make sure that you're so valuable, you're so must have, that you do exist over long periods of time. And one of the ways that we have attacked that historically is to control what you can control, get as much data, right? All this uncertainty of a startup, then compounded with everything else going on in the world, is to just accumulate as much data as you possibly can so that you can make better decisions, right? And games have restarted. Frank, in your business, is that a place you're gravitating to? This is a question from a listener. They want to know: Are you following the Bundesliga right now? Are you following other things to just pull us, and Rachel and Lou as well, to pull as much of that data as you can before you tread carefully forward?
I think it'd be crazy not to. I think the Bundesliga, as an example, is a bit of the canary in the coal mine. We'll be able to see what happens. And I join Rachel's point of view that I don't want to be the first to try something. In this particular case, I love being innovative. I love trying new things. But, if something doesn't work or a joke doesn't work, or a promotion doesn't work, it's a little different from when a health and safety issue doesn't work, right? That's a little bit more, it's a lot more, profound in terms of what the effects might be. So I think we all as an industry have to look at what's going on out there and how people are being kept safe. The plans I've seen from client venues that I've worked with, that I do work with, are really incredibly complex, detail oriented in terms of how they're going to manage ingress, how they're going to manage screening, how they're going to manage egress, how they're going to manage the concourses. And, are there going to be, two-way concourses where on the right you're going one way and on the left you're going a different way? There's going to be some real important short-term changes that are going to have to be made. And it's going to be, and this is remarkable, we're never going to get a green light. We're going to get an amber light. We're going to get a flashing yellow, proceed with caution. And you determine how slow you're going to go through that intersection. It's going to be a while before we see green lights. I think we will see green lights eventually. I think there's not going to be a major need to make permanent architectural changes to our venues and things like that. You may make them safer. You may decide you're not going to do buffets anymore, as an example, because it's just good health practice. But in terms of the acute issues that we're dealing with today, it's going to be a series of not waves, but ripples that will, we're going to get one ripple and then another ripple and then another ripple, and things will ultimately inch back toward what the new normal is going to be, which is going to look a lot like the old normal, but with some changes. I agree that there are going to be some changes, but I don't think that they're going to be profound permanent changes.
Rachel?
And what you're seeing now is there's so much money on the table. I'm watching baseball really closely. You have the owners, you have the league. Decisions, and I come from, watching Adam make one of the first decisions of canceling the NBA and looking at the domino effect that had on sports, but ultimately to wake up and know you saved lives, that transcends sports. So I would always err on the side of, the financials versus the right thing to do. So with so much money on the table, Brian, is people want to kind of like itch back a bit sooner because they're looking at, what does it look like if I do nothing? And that's where, just sitting where I do, you have to map out for the foreseeable future what your business model could be without live events, whether there are fans or no fans. Yep. And you're going to see leagues that can survive. They can withstand a loss of an entire season. We've seen lockouts before. We've seen what that looks like. Yep. But ultimately, these fringe or more niche sports that feel like, I can go do, something by myself on an island and think everyone's going to be safe and healthy and people will tune in. I don't know what the longevity ultimately looks like there. I'd firmly put stakes in the ground right now of, leading with transparency of we're not comfortable going back yet and putting you in a building until we've really stress tested that, and then figure out if you have other areas of your business. I mean, listen, I sat home 3 days in a row. We watched the NFL draft. I didn't know what to expect. If I had to do that next year, we'd tune back in. So, some of it is just, how do you adapt to the situation we're in? And can you continue to put on that programming for the foreseeable future?
Lou?
Yeah, where I've seen the most, where I could comment is, as you mentioned, I'm on the board of Teamworks, which is an athlete engagement platform. And once this crisis hit, they basically offered their product, which is used by all the major colleges, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Cowboys, the Packers, the NHL teams are all using it. It's an engagement platform where they saw that they needed a communications platform for the players to just communicate around what they're going to be doing. And so, Brian, we both went to Trinity, and they're looking at, can they get the NESCAC sports back together in the fall? And it's starting to look like it may be that way. I mean, you heard this morning, BC said they're going to be bringing people back to school. So some of the schools are leading, and I think will put pressure on others to do it. But I think the colleges are, they're in a really tricky situation because their revenue line is totally unpredictable with foreign students probably not going to be coming back. So they're looking at all different ways to bring the experience back, but have it, to Frank's point, for everybody to be safe. And I think you'll hear more about that. But I think it's finally starting to make some progress with that. But it's interesting because, if you think about a collegiate experience, sports are such a huge part of that. We played hockey in college together. That's how we got to know each other. That's how we communicate still. We go back and watch games. So we're hoping for the best on that.
So we got about 5-10 minutes left. We're getting a flood of great questions from people. And one that's jumped out at me is, and then we'll all go around the horn again, and I'll start with it, and I'll raise it and then answer, and then go around the horn. Somebody asked, what's the biggest change that they think persists in the next normal? Right. That's so I'll put mine forth, give you guys a little bit of time to think about that. Mine is this. As I mentioned, we've seen this outpouring of what I'll call accelerated EQ, okay, emotional quotient, and people just yearning for safety and surety and home and community and local. One of the things that has come out of it is that advertisers, as uneven as they are flocking to content that makes people feel good, and they want to associate themselves with nurses, with first responders, with doctors, with, you know, that we're here to help you heal, right? That's that I think is going to persist for a while, and people looking for that confidence, if you will, and a lot of it they're finding out of their homes, out of their communities, regardless of we're not going to talk politics, and we haven't even mentioned it, but that, just push it aside for a second, is my neighbor okay? Is everything all right? You know, that I think is going to persist for some time, from what I see. So I'll ask you each to think about that, and then I'll come back with one last question that I'm interested in. Lou, we're going to start with you this time.
Yeah, no question. It's the continuation of working from home. Now, there's a great article in the Boston Globe this morning. Scott Kirshner posted about this. They did a study on whether people were more productive or not. And clearly people with long commutes are feeling better about this, more productive. If they can, limit their commute time, they're going to be happier working from home. But it isn't the case for everybody, right? There's some people. I have a friend who's got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. They both work. They do 6-hour shifts. This has not been a fun time for them. It's not easy. So, but I do think the acceptance of work from home, and you're going to hear the word distributed workforce rather than remote, because there's still some degree of pejorative term with remote, but I think the acceptance of working from home is going to continue to accelerate after this.
Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I'll play off the kindness piece and community for sure, Brian. I think given the economy has been so crippled, and I personally know just great people for no other reason than COVID are out of work, but it's really forced people to take stock of, was I happy? Where do I want to be at that next phase in my life? And you don't have many opportunities. And we all know we work in fast-paced environments where you wake up and it's 10 years later at a job or whatever it is. And my kids have gotten older. And I definitely think, this period in time where people can become more self-reflective and really aware of their overall happiness and what's important has become much more paramount in their lives in terms of where they want to be coming out of it. You may have had the greatest job, but were you really that happy? Or did you always want to try this thing? And now, when you think about so many lives, not just that have been lost, so much heartache, I will say, of, people just hurting across the board of different reasons. You wouldn't have had this opportunity because we do move so quick and you have other priorities. Now it's, health and well-being, starting there as a foundation and then building everything around that. And I've always been a big proponent of, where you're happiest, you thrive and you're most productive. And that's, as I move forward and I think about hiring for the team and, investing in people for the future, is just making sure that culturally, not just, where I sit, but other companies, don't go back to the craziness of where we were prior to this pandemic, but really come out of it changed as leaders, because they're going to see, just greater environments for the world when you think about, people who sacrifice so much for their jobs.
Right.
So I agree with everything I just heard, but I'm gonna take a contrarian view on one thing, which is if we don't come back to work collectively, and I recognize a lot of our work is going to be remote, and I get that, at least in the short term. And think about this in terms of your business as a sports organization. You can watch television and get a much better view of the game. But the highest and best form of engagement is live. we're in the live event business, all of us, on one level or another. Even if we are technically oriented, there's still a live component that is at the core and the heart of everything that we're doing. So if the highest and best form of engagement is at the stadium, at the arena, the ballpark, the rink, then would not the best and highest form of engagement be at your place of business? And so if we're really quick to talk about everything being remote, we have to think of that not just in terms of how the landlord deals with that, but we're kind of the landlord here when it comes to the sports business. So we have to make sure that we're delivering an experience in the stadium or arena that transcends all of that now cultural, tear in the fabric, if you will, of being together. Humans are social animals, and we want to be together. And there's, I guess, in our own businesses where we work, we have to create the best and highest form of engagement for our teams
So
to be able to bring them back, recognizing that they have to feel comfortable, they have to be safe. We recognize that. I recognize that. But I see a great parallel to gathering ourselves as teams and gathering ourselves as fans.
So that's a great segue to my last question that I was going to ask of each of you. Okay. I think I mentioned it earlier, and I mean, we're all facing some huge decisions, right? When to bring people back. The big one for me, frankly, is when do I send my kids to school? Like with real comfort, right? That I feel good about that decision. My wife, that's all she thinks about. A lot of what she thinks about right now. How do we, as leaders of organizations, as board members, as people who are asked to do this, how do we give people what they need most right now, which I really believe is confidence? How do we give them that confidence? Lou, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm with you. You have to make sure people are safe, and in some ways, to counter Frank's point, remote safe. I feel safe where I am right now. I don't necessarily feel safe when I go out. I still don't, and I'm not a germaphobe. I've just been sort of nervous. I'd interested. There's if you Google HBS Live, Harvard Business School invested in a program for their exec ed business that basically takes the case method and through technology makes it feel like you are there. You really feel like you're there. I'm going to be trained on this because I got to teach remotely there in the fall. It's remarkable. I know you want to be there in person, and I agree, Frank. There's nothing like a concert or nothing like a Stanley Cup playoff game, but the technology is going to continue to advance. 20 years ago, I was at a company called Webline, which was one of the first web collaboration products that competed with WebEx. Cisco bought us. All the features that you're seeing today in Zoom, we had on our list, but it took the plumbing of the internet and cameras and PCs. It took all this other technology over 20 years to get to where we are now in Zoom. That's going to accelerate. I think there's a lot of money going to be going into the next set of technological companies that enable you to feel like you're at home or feel like you're there in person, but you still are remote.
Rachel?
This is a tough one. Like, there's no crystal ball in terms of the timing. I'm with Lou. I'm safe in my house. We do walks, but other than that, I haven't been to a store in over 2 months. And even with the flattening of the curve, and, I wake up every morning and read how many cases in my town, there still is that, hold your breath when things are going to start opening up for 14 days later, where it goes from there. So I'm definitely sitting here not focused as much on when does everything reopen, but can we stay in the moment and still plan for the future and not get wrapped up in, everything's going to be canceled for the foreseeable future. I'm trying to balance so much activities that are happening, at work, at the home, because I think if you're planning too far out, you're just going to be disappointed. It's like early on, I kept hearing, You know, I was talking with Nick, our CEO, about this. Oh, the Olympics say they're still going. And I said, everyone can say they're still going till they're not. That's the easiest, that's the easiest way to cancel. So, you know, I'm kind of just in that mindset, you know, when I look around of, you know, how do we use all of this data to better inform us? Let some other people go back to work. Let's look at what that looks like. And then fast forward a couple months, you know, Brian, I'm in the same, you know, boat, 2 weeks and school's out over here. I don't know if they go back, you know, in the last week of August, or what that looks like for summers in Saratoga that we look forward to and everything else. It's really on more of a day by day, week by week, and then making sure that there's that comfort that there have been no new cases, that, you know, medicine has advanced from a vaccine perspective, because these things take years.
Frank?
Yeah, they do take years. And I wasn't suggesting we throw open our office doors today. I think that's going to take some time. Like I said, it's going to be a flashing yellow light for a while. And green might be 3 years from now. So I'm taking the longer view. Being in the experience business, that's what I do for a living. I help people develop experiences, whether they're expressed and manifest in a sports event, or at a concert venue, on the rooftop of a building in the East River, or whatever it happens to be. That's the business we're in. Now we're delivering, and I know Rachel delivered a great televised content experience, last Saturday, and we'll continue to do that with the DRL on NBC Sportsnet. It was a tremendous and great fun experience. I think we're gonna keep shifting around how we deliver those experiences. A lot of them are going to be virtual now. A lot of them are going to start leaking back into the live sphere, but delivered virtually, delivered by broadcast. I think there's still going to be that hunger to come back to the stadium, come back to the arena. At the appropriate time, we'll do that. I think Dr. Fauci was right. We don't make that time frame. The virus does that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what I do think. I think there is a day when we look very much like we used to look. And the reason that I feel that way is when you take a look 100 years ago at the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, 675,000 people in this country died. There was social distancing. It wasn't as uniformly communicated as it is today, because we've got all these great technology platforms to do that. But ball players were wearing masks, fans were wearing masks, people stayed away from each other. If they didn't stay away from each other, they got sick. It took a couple of years for that to go by. It was actually well into 1919 by the time that happened. In 1921, Major League Baseball set attendance records. People came back. In between that, there was a terrible economic depression, just like now, where it will come back, because again, I think people are social animals. That's what our businesses are based on, and we'll continue to engage with each other. Right now, we're doing it remotely. Eventually, we'll be doing it in person.
So on that uplifting, positive note, it's 1:10. Jeff, I guess we'll turn it back to you. You've used a good chunk of everyone's time. Thank you all. This was awesome, guys. I learned a lot, and other people did too. Jeff, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you very much.
So first of all, you guys are true professionals. So thank you. It's been an incredible dialogue on so many concepts. I've discovered paper during the quarantine. It's thinner than the iPhone. You can write on it. You can touch it. It's tactile. So it's been kind of fun. I have a whole bunch of notes, a couple of quick thank yous that I want to say. So first of all, the conversation about how do we prepare for the next normal? How do we prepare for sports coming back safely? Combined with thinking through kindness and being involved in people's lives and getting a little bit of glimpse into what goes on in their living rooms, offices, etc. at the end of the day, what people will remember is how you make them feel. And I think you guys have covered that in such a wonderful way. It's really what we're trying to accomplish with Sport Hiatus, is celebrating what's innovative, what's interesting, what's exciting, leadership during a crazy time. So we all have our own balances of work and play and life. We're all going through various areas. Rachel said it. There are many, many incredibly qualified, talented individuals that have no full-time role right now because of nothing other than circumstances of the world. So I think these are things that are all incredible conversations. And I sat here with a smile on my face listening, and I hope many of the people that are also watching have done the same. So Bryant, when we had our first conversation around bringing the Boston VC sports community into the overall mix of the global VC sports and Sport Hiatus office hours, you said, I will bring together a killer team and have an amazing dialogue. And you can check that box with a big smiley face because you
appreciate that.
Delivered. Rachel, when we chatted for a couple of minutes earlier, you said mom and dad were watching. So hi, mom and dad. Hope they're loving it. I'll throw out another one. Frank. Frank's book's available on Amazon. Strong endorsed promo. It's very interesting. Not only have had amazing experiences, but there it is.
Must read.
Do go wrong, and that's something that we all need to be prepared for and be thinking about. And Lou, I'm sitting here at my desk. If you believe that the quarantine is a rapid move to digital and a leveling of the playing field, then we all sit here with our computers and our iPads and our laptops and our iPhones, then we all have equal abilities to do things, and we all multitask. So one of those examples of multitasking is my brother-in-law, Darren, texting me saying that he plays hockey with you in Boston. So the world is small, and I love when it all comes together in super fun ways. I'm a big believer in super connecting. So Darren says hello. He'll see you on the hockey.
Oh, Darren's a great guy. Yeah.
On the rink
Tuesday
soon.
morning hockey. Yeah.
Exactly. Just quickly looking at my notes. So this will be available VOD soon. Please interact. This is your community. So anyone who has anything they want to share, speakers they want to see us include in office hours, please engage us, and we'd love to get them involved. And then two final things I want to wrap up. My kids are downstairs. It was just my son's birthday. So Harrison and Lila, if you're watching, probably hear you screaming downstairs in the background, but happy birthday. And
Happy birthday.
daughter
Happy
Prem's birthday was
birthday.
the same day. So happy birthday to Prem. And then lastly, thank you guys. And then lastly, I'll just wrap it up with our mission, which is our goal is to support leagues, teams, athletes, broadcasters, publishers, brands, agencies, partners, entrepreneurs, and investors. We are one team. Sports never stop. Fans never stop. So be creative, innovate, be safe, and we'll be back next week. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Everybody be
Bye.
healthy.
All the best.